All right. So a year ago, many of you know, I had open heart surgery. I was just across the park, waking up every day, looking for a tiny glimpse of Central Park. And the only thing I could see out of my hotel room, I couldn't actually see anything on the ground. All I could see was this building. For some reason, this is what you could see across the park from there. And I didn't know what building it was. I actually had no idea. I just knew it was next to the Natural History Museum. And so I determined that when I ever got out of the hospital, assuming I would survive, I would walk across the park to find out what the hell this place was. I didn't go in. I just was like, oh, got it. Historical Society, check. Let's go back to the park. I had no idea I would be standing here in front of you inside this building today, which is kind of wild. And one of the nice things about having heart surgery, I don't really recommend it, but if you insist upon having heart surgery, it forces you to take a step back from your life. It forces you to, for instance, hand over a lot of your responsibilities to colleagues. And I was so incredibly fortunate to have a team at Scope3 that could pick up the slack. In fact, according to most employee surveys, it was way better when I was not there. So for those of you who filled out that survey, I know who you are. And the business was great. Like, our customers supported us. We were able to keep doing our core business incredibly well. And it gave me space to go think about new things. And I didn't really mean to. It wasn't like I was sitting in my room going, let's think about AI today. But it was something I'd wanted to explore more than I had time to. Digging deep into sustainability for a couple of years, there wasn't really space to go play around with large language models or understand how they worked or to really go deep. But lying there just with kind of nothing else to do, I bought myself a PlayStation, didn't even touch it. I was so fascinated by what AI could do. That tells you a lot about me, probably. Super cool. I still have the PlayStation and still have never turned it on because I have remained completely obsessed with the power of this new technology. I think my first few months were pretty skeptical, both with what it was able to do, but also with the environmental consequences of the technology. And a lot of my research was to try to understand why we would do sort of obvious basic things in this incredibly inefficient way, which of course reminded me of programmatic advertising a lot. And I thought, maybe we should do something about this. Maybe this is a Scope3 problem, that we should try to quantify the carbon impact of AI the same way we have for this incredibly complex industry of programmatic ad tech. And so I called a friend, as one does, a guy named Camilo Fosco, who was one of the founders of Memorable, which later on sold to Reddit. And I said to Camilo, I know nothing about this. Can you explain how all these things work? And I wrote him this long email, and he was like, it's very cute. I appreciate your attempt. It's not what it does. And he sent me on this long rabbit hole of talking to MIT professors and getting involved in working groups, and got to a point where, you heard Hugo mention reasoning models. Well, academic research has known about this for a long time. The idea that doing a lot of inference, not training, would give us better results than we could get just from training models. Now, if these terms are foreign to you, fine. Training is when you dump the internet into a big set of GPUs and try to get it to build the model. Inference is when you use the model. And when you see a model say, I don't like the first thing I said to you, let me go fix it, that's when it's doing this reasoning process of inferencing again and again and again. So learning all of these things, I couldn't help myself. I started to think about what are the implications. It was obvious to me and to many of us that this technology actually works incredibly well, even though we don't fully understand why. And it's going to fundamentally change things about the world we live in, but also about the media we consume and the advertising we put on that media. And of course, for many of us, the most important question is, what's this going to do to ad tech? And all of those questions, as we were digging into the sustainability questions and trying to understand what this all meant from an environmental perspective, I couldn't help but worry that if we were to just plug all of these AI technologies onto this incredibly inefficient programmatic supply chain, we would actually hear not just environmental problems, many of the other things that Ariel just mentioned, for instance, brand safety issues or this long intermediated supply chain, would actually be made dramatically worse by plugging in more AI. And so I started to wonder, what would you do if you were lying in a hotel room waiting for your heart to heal and you could start from scratch building ad tech? How would it work? What would you do if you didn't ever know about programmatic? And by the way, programmatic wasn't here 20 years ago. We launched the first ad exchange on April 1st, 2005. So 20 years ago, in 2 weeks, was the first programmatic ad impression, which is kind of cool. So we should have like a birthday party or something. And in 1 more year, when it's 21, we can finally all drink. So I know this whole industry has been waiting. Finally, some alcohol. So I know you're excited. But because I was pre-programmatic, AKA old, I was able to think about this and say, well, what is the thing that we had to do to make this work? Because don't forget, this was all almost impossible technically 20 years ago. Computers were way slower. We didn't have the kind of bandwidth or compute or capabilities we do today. And so one of the things we did was to introduce taxonomies. And taxonomies are basically categorizing things, simplifying. So if you go next door to the Natural History Museum, they have on the wall like all the different kinds of species. And it's really fun to be like, you know, why are these different species in different categories? Like who made that crazy idea? But that's the same idea we've done in this industry. And so the problem with taxonomies is it's a simplification. It's simplifying things to say good or bad. This is about health, or is this about fertility, or is this about, you know, drinking wine? It's about all those things, you know, about please don't drink wine when you're pregnant, you know, but those categories are really difficult to understand the heart of content. AI is extraordinary at understanding content. It doesn't need to break things down. When you say, what is this article about? It doesn't give you back keywords. It doesn't give you back categories. It gives you a summary that you can ask questions about. It can learn and it can absorb. And if you think about what that means, it means that the fundamental idea of taxonomy in advertising is going to go away. And the technologies we think about that are so good at trying to taxonomify things, I'm not sure if that's a word, are going to break. They're not good enough. The thing that came to me in this process was anywhere we're processing and absorbing content and trying to understand what it means has to change. And of course, the place we all go to, what I think we just heard in that last panel, is we have to understand content for a few reasons. One is it really, really bad? Is this something that no ad should be next to? That would be important to know for legal reasons, if nothing else. Number two, is this content that I want my brand to be next to? Is it acceptable or suitable for my brand? Is it aligned with my values and principles? And third, I want to know, is there something about this content, this movie, this video, this audio, whatever, that actually could be powerful for my brand? Are there messages or products that might resonate for the person who's consuming this content right now? And those things are actually way deeper and way more powerful than what you can get from taxonomy. And so in, I don't know, September, I think, I was finally back to traveling. And by the way, for me, like not traveling for a few months was kind of amazing for my carbon footprint. And again, heart surgery, great for the environment. But I had to go visit some clients and do some things. So I flew to Japan, and I had 13 hours in the plane. And so I downloaded a model, like an LLM, and I spent the entire flight totally geeking out, trying to figure out if I could build a way to understand content from an advertising perspective. And I used actually some articles from people.com that I downloaded, and it was a bunch of sort of controversial content, you know, like Ellen DeGeneres saying F *** K about something. I mean, oh my gosh. Really? The F word? Like, I can't believe how unsafe this is, you know, or someone talking about drinking a martini while they made dinner for their kids, or, you know, things that we probably would consider fairly innocuous for most advertisers. But if you ran them through traditional keyword-based or category-based systems, would flag for all kinds of reasons. And so I said, let's go build a model. But instead of trying to use AI to categorize, what if we used AI to understand? And I said, what if I were a large insurance advertiser? I went to the website very slowly on the plane, and I downloaded all of their values and principles, and I copied and pasted them into this model. And I said, would this advertiser's values align with this content? And I went through every single one of these articles, and almost all of them were fine. And I did this for a few other examples. I didn't train these models. I didn't do any kind of fine-tuning. I just said, let's see what happens if just an out-of-the-box model looks at this content. And it was extraordinary. It was so much better than you would think. And the idea then hit me that every brand is going to build their own models. You're going to have a model that exactly represents the interests of your brand. And I think actually Hugo just mentioned this in the context of creative production. We are going to have models that are us as brands. And those models will be powerful enough to go run on every single piece of content on the internet to say, does this meet my standards? Is there something here that should trigger a message? What message should I deliver on this piece of content for this particular brand? That is technically insane if you think about how expensive it is financially to run a LLM on a piece of content. It is nothing that this industry has ever imagined from a technical capacity. But from an outcome perspective, it was kind of extraordinary. And so, you know me, I got to Japan. I'm supposed to be in meetings with all these wonderful Japanese companies, and something in the back of my head is like, man, I wish we could do this. Like, this would be so cool if we could find a way to make this work across the whole internet. And so I'm going to share a slide because my title here is From Impossible to Inevitable. And this is an analysis Andreessen Horowitz did on the cost of different models. The blue one is like GPT-3, so like, you know, ancient 3-year-old models. And if you look at the MMLU score, I forget what it stands for, but 42 means it's like fine. And 83 is like really good. This is what you'd see if you went into ChatGPT today and started having a conversation. It's really good at understanding content. And my belief is that that orange line represents good enough for most advertising tasks that we're talking about. And there was nothing that could do this in 2022. But about 2 years ago, maybe 18 months ago, when GPT-4 came out, it cost $45 to do 1 million tokens. That's like, give or take 1 million words. It's a little less than 1 million words, but call it that. And so I think the internet, give or take, the ad-supported internet is around 1 trillion tokens of content to do a decent job of getting coverage. If you wanted to run an LLM on every single piece of content, that'd be a pretty good start. Maybe more if you want to get into the depths of all social, but this would get you a long way. So $45 million to run one model on the whole internet 2 years ago. If you look at the cost, and you look at where we were when Llama came out, Llama 3.1 came out last August, give or take, the cost had dropped by a factor of 10. We're talking about, give or take, $1 million to run one model on the whole internet. And we heard about DeepSeek earlier. DeepSeek costs about 27 cents to do the same thing that GPT-4 cost $45 for 2 years ago. It would only cost you $270,000 to run a model on the whole internet. And if you just follow that trend, what we're talking about is, you know, $100,000, $50,000. These are numbers that, if you're a billion-dollar advertiser, I think you can afford. I think you could find 50 grand to train a model. In fact, let's train a few. Think about the ROI you'd have to have. You're only talking about a 1% improvement in your performance or a 1% drop in the amount of content you're incorrectly blocking to make this make sense. What I'm saying is that these curves mean it's not just possible, it's inevitable that brands are going to have their own bespoke models to understand context. And so what we're going to introduce, not just today, but as an industry, as a world, where taxonomies are fundamentally dead. Simplifying things into categories is no longer state of the art, not that it ever was. It's insufficient to take full advantage of the technology we have today. And so from my perspective, what this means is we should build technologies that can take advantage of where we're going to be in a year. It's not, I'm not going to wait a year and then start figuring this out. We should do it now, because by the time it's fully mature and adopted, it needs to work. So the first big idea that we're going to share with you today is a product we call Scope3 Brand Standards. And this product is able to look at the full context of any piece of content on the internet, understand it through the lens of a brand, and decide whether that content is suitable or not for this specific brand based on its exact requirements. No keywords, no categories, actually very little need to do much more than give it feedback on whether it's doing the right thing or not. And because we know that AI can sometimes hallucinate, we're still not perfect, we realized it can't just sit alone. We can't just ship you a model. We needed to build all the foundations and framework to let that model run safely and effectively at scale. And so what I'm going to show you today, I think, is a live demo of how we train a brand standards model. I'm going to say already that this screen is too bright, and there's a gray background you can't see. This product looks way better on that laptop than it does on the screen. We tried valiantly this morning to figure out how to get the contrast to show. So after this, if you want to see what it really looks like, it's actually much nicer looking than you're going to see now, but hopefully it will work. So what I'm going to show you is we're going to create a fake brand in honor of Anne, her new company, Anne Mart. She's got a new toys and clothing, kids' toys brand. Kids' toys, because she's got a kid, so we're very creative. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to train a model, a brand standards model, specifically for Anne's kids' toys. And I'd like to invite up Kelsey Lefwich, who is one of our amazing engineers, who's worked tirelessly for the last bit to make this. And we're going to see if it works. Excuse me. Muhammad Ali would say, it's going to work. It's going to be the greatest demo of all time. This is going to be great. It's like the first test. Can you type your password on stage with like 300 people looking at you? That's actually the hardest part of this demo. Okay. All right, fantastic. Okay, so welcome to Scope3 Brand Standards. There's 3 steps to build a brand standards model. And you can see this is Anne's new fancy company. We've got creative toys and activities for kids, which is actually a brand category. So this could be more than just one brand inside of it. And the first thing we do is we calibrate the model. Now what this means is that we're going to actually go, and in real life we would do a lot of these, but what we're going to do is go through a bunch of different examples of potentially borderline content, and we're going to decide whether we think the model should say yes or no. And this is a way to make sure we're calibrating when we run the model, is it doing the right thing? And over time, let's say you're working on this for a while, every time you find an example of what you think is or is not compliant with the brand standards, you could actually go and tweak this. So we're first going to calibrate, and then we're going to go back and we're going to train a model and see if it aligns. So many of you may have heard of Taylor Swift. This is an article in Harvard Business Review about her strategic genius. And so I guess my question for all of you is, thumbs up or thumbs down? Do you think this is aligned with Anne's kids' toys brand? Everyone feels pretty good. All right, Anne says yes. Okay, cool. So we're going to say yes, it meets brand standards. I'm going to give it a yes there, Kelsey. We voted yes. Okay, cool. All right, next one. Luxury Daily. This is an article about Louis Vuitton launching a new debut beauty line with Pat McGrath. Anybody have opinions? Yes, yes, yes? Okay, we got some yeses. Let's do that one. Okay, now this one I feel very controversial about. It's a bunch of French that I can't read. So this is really a moratorium on French language. And so it's the last one. So anybody have a, Roman, does it even make sense in French? Oui or non? Okay. Okay, Jean-Marc says no way. I don't know what it's talking about. So we're going to say no. Okay, cool. No way. All right. So once we've calibrated this model, now we're going to try to train a model on this. So let's go create our model. Now, over time, you could have multiple models that you could see how they perform against each other. And by the way, we run something called common sense brand safety. So we have our own separate model that's trained on all of the really sort of negative content that we know no one wants to be next to. So there's 2 layers of model here. If it comes up as inappropriate, offensive, or anything sort of obviously bad, the brand safety filter catches it, and it won't even run it through your model. So that's really important. Also on the hallucination side, you don't have to write things in here like, I don't want to be next to porn. It's already taken care of. All right, so we can guide you through this process, or let's just paste in the one we did ahead of time. So we wrote a prompt. This took us a long time for Wonder World, and let's check it out. So we just took the brand values that we made up, put them in here. So creative exploration, inclusive play. Okay, but we avoid overly commercial messaging aimed at children, content that promotes passive screen time, themes of distress, blah, blah, blah. You know, wait, considers unsuitable any content with excessive focus on luxury or expensive products. Wait a second. I think we might have gotten that one wrong. We did put that in there for a reason. It does thrive in contexts like parenting blogs and so forth. So we're sort of saying this is what we think this brand feels like. Let's test it. So when we hit test, this is going to go out and actually run this model against all the content we just tested. Okay? And it's going to show us where the model agrees with what we calibrated and where it doesn't. So hopefully, yeah, we do. We see that luxury disagrees. So let's click into luxury. And what we can see is that we said yes, but the model said no. Because the model read that prompt, it's smarter than we are, and it said, this is focusing on luxury brands and products. We don't want to be focused on luxury products, because Ant's cheap. I'm assuming that's why. Maybe not. And so now we have a couple choices. You can see a few more where it came up and said, it's interesting, we ran this before and it came up with slightly different outcomes, which is cool. Like, why does it think this is different than us? This Japanese telco one, as an example. So in this one, human said yes. We did this beforehand. And the model says, you know, we don't want to be near news about violence or a tragedy. It talks about a cyber attack, security incidents. This is exactly what we want to do when we train models. We're asking about these things. So we go back in here. Either we change the human decisions, or we'll go back, edit the prompt, and tweak it to be really clear about what we want. This process means that before this model goes live, we're going to be confident that it meets our brand's needs. If you compare this to sort of state-of-the-art tools today in the brand safety and suitability space, what you're trying to do is come up with keywords that kind of map to what you're trying to accomplish. You don't have anywhere near this nuance, and there's really no obvious way to know why it happens. So this, to me, is an incredibly powerful way for us to understand how our brand-specific model executes in the world for us. Okay, let's go put it somewhere. Okay, so we've done this process, we built a model, let's go deploy it. Maybe. Did we break it, Kelsey? All right, fantastic. So one thing I'll put in here is we do have a media control section where we can go and set up things like inclusion lists, exclusion lists. There's a bunch of capabilities in there as well. We're not going to show them to you right this second. Now we get to choose where we deploy this. So I think I saw Samantha in the room somewhere. Is she here still? There she is. Can we put this on the trade desk? All right, let's do it. All right, so Ann Mart has a trade desk account that I stole, and we're going to create a segment, and we're going to choose some countries where we want it to run, and we choose whether it's an include or exclude segment. They'll do the same thing, they just look opposite in the trade desk interface, and we just hit deploy. And what this does is goes into the trade desk API, creates a segment, maps it back to a real-time data provider that we have running, where we deploy this profile. And as our model learns, it's going to actually start responding to more and more of the URLs we see from Trade Desk. And we see, I forget how many, it's a lot, like 10 million a day or something like that. But we're actually going to run our model against every one of those URLs and now have precise AI-derived brand safety and suitability protection on the Trade Desk. I think this actually doesn't work right now because we blocked it for the demo, but if we hadn't told it not to deploy, this would actually, in real life, be live on Trade Desk, which is really cool. Let's go back to the main screen and see what it looks like, too. One thing that's, we're going to get to see the pretty graphs here. Or did we break it? Let's see what happens. So one thing we think is really important is to see, again, this is about understanding what this model does. And so this is zooming forward in time a little bit because you don't want to sit here and wait. But what we can actually see is how this model classifies a whole bunch of different categories. So for instance, one thing that I know many of us care about is how do we respond to news and media? Like this is blocking 25% of news and media in this fake example. The benchmark of similar models is a little bit lower. Whereas for health, we're a little bit more accommodating than the average model. And so we think this kind of transparency is incredibly helpful for a brand as it tunes its model to really dig in and understand how this applies to different kinds of content, different publishers and properties, different channels, to really have the full data science suite available to understand what is my model doing and how does it affect the kind of content I monetize. Anything else I want to show in this one? Are we good? All right. I would say any questions, but I don't think there's any mics. The main point is, so you can't ask any questions, basically. Sorry. So this is, we've seen this. Now, one thing you might also be thinking is, where else can I deploy this model? So let's go back to deployment for a second, and let's look at where we can put this. So we have a bunch of DSPs we're already plugged into. Let's look at SSPs. We also have a lot of SSP partners, many of whom are here. What would be really cool is if we could run this on platforms. What if we could put this model, this AI model, bespoke for our brand on a major platform? Well, how about Meta? Don't hit deploy. I am incredibly pleased to share that Meta has allowed us to run our models in their new pre-bid content blocking program, which means that they will actually send us reports on behalf of clients of the adjacent content that runs next to advertising on Meta. And then they give us a chance to analyze that content with these brand bespoke models and come back to them and tell them yes or no. The same judgment we all just gave, we can now do across all public posts on Meta, which is, I think, incredibly powerful. You want to show the dashboard of what that looks like, kind of? And this is actually live. We started testing with Meta a few weeks ago. Fake data, but this is exactly the dashboard that you would see as a client. You can see how many posts we're analyzing, posts or reels or all the different types of content. And you can see us, as an example here, coming back and saying that this particular reel didn't meet our standards, and so we've actually said, please don't share it anymore. This is now available for any of our clients today, and actually all of this, in the next couple weeks, we'd love to share with you. So if you're thinking you have a client or you'd like to play with this, we can actually log you into the system, play with prompts, see how it works, and actually run tests now. This is something that's available today. So super excited about having Meta as a key partner, and look forward to adding other platforms as well.